Funding for this program is provided by Bruce Foods Corporation, makers of the complete line of Cajun King seafood seasoning mixes and other distinctive Louisiana-style food products. And by the Dairy Farmers of Louisiana. When you want good programming, just add milk.
Louisiana. Hi, I'm Chef John Folse, welcoming you to the bayous of South Louisiana. Today, Cajun and Creole cooking holds a prime spot in the world of international cuisine, and I would love for you to know a little bit about it. So why not sit back, relax, and join me and some of my friends as we cook up another great Taste of Louisiana. Hello everyone and welcome to Taste of Louisiana. I'm Chef John Folse, and you know, somebody said a long time ago that you can never go back. Well, you know, probably that person didn't live on the Mississippi River somewhere in South Louisiana, but boy, I tell you, I sure did, and I'll go back all the time. You know, I remember as a young boy having a lot of idle time in the swamplands of Louisiana, and since I lived right on the Mississippi River, it was many, many days that we ran up on the levees or the dikes that kept the river from overflowing the farmlands of South Louisiana, and with a couple of our friends, we would sit on the levee and just reminisce about days gone by when the great riverboats went up and down the river. And you know, every now and then, those dreams would just come to life as around the bend, we would see one of the great paddle wheelers coming up the river, playing that calliope, and boy, I tell you, we would race 1,000,000 miles an hour down the levee just to try to see if we could keep up. Well, I guess you've probably figured it out. Today, we're going to talk about Mississippi River boat cooking. What else could we talk about in Louisiana? Look at this beautiful sunset right outside of New Orleans. And the whistles, you know what that means? The boat is about to take off from dock. This is the Natchez. I want you to know that one of the most famous races, we're going to talk about it a little bit later, between the Natchez and the Robert E. Lee took place in 1870, and that Natchez was the fifth boat that actually took the race, fifth or sixth, I think. This scene is right on the levees outside of the French Quarter. I guess this is around St. Louis Cathedral, and the boats will pick up passengers for little daily excursions up and down the river. Imagine getting on one of these beautiful paddle wheelers with all the people from all over the nation and the world who's traveled into the city to take a ride on one of these beautiful boats on a Sunday afternoon. Look at that sight, will you? That's churning up the Mississippi River. Imagine being on that thing all dressed up in silks and top hats back in the mid-1800s. What a sight. I guess these two people are having a pretty good time themselves. Food and music, always known to be #1 in New Orleans. Imagine combining it with the singing on a paddle wheeler, on the singing on a riverboat. This is, again, probably a little Sunday brunch aboard one of the great paddle wheelers coming up and down the Mississippi River. This is something that people, as I say, will travel thousands of miles to do, and I know I've wanted to do it many, many, many times in Louisiana. Paddle wheels, steamboats, what can I say? As a young kid, I just dreamed so many times about being a pilot on one of those boats. The boats not only carried produce and livestock and goods up and down the river. In my own part of Louisiana, the steamboats were used to carry cypress trees out of the swamps, and all the little canals used the boats as a means of transportation. Of course, many years later, we started to see the grand floating palaces driving up and down the river, riding up and down the river, I should say. And they would pick up passengers in towns to bring them to the large cities. And what a sight that must have been. Some of the little bitty small towns of Louisiana would have never seen a touch of class had it not been for some of those great riverboats just docking in these little towns and letting people come on to see the great fabrics of the drapes or the curtains that, or the carpet that was brought in from Europe to just grace these floating palaces. What a wonderful time. Well, the foods were special too. So we want to talk about some of the cooking that was done on the riverboats. And I don't know whether all of these dishes actually were cooked on boats day in and day out, but I can tell you one thing. I know for a fact that some of those great Sunday buffets on the boats had some of the dishes that I'm going to cook today. And the first one that I want to do is an oyster stew of Louisiana. Now, I know a lot of you have had the oyster stew that's cream-based. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the one that I'm going to do today has more of, I guess, some of the Cajun flavor to it. And this is one of the dishes that the riverboat cook may have picked up as that boat docked at one of those little bitty Cajun towns. Let me fire up my black iron pot here. Now, into the pot, I have a dark brown roux. Now, this is equal parts of oil and flour. And as you know, you can use any type of oil that you would like to make a roux. And in Cajun cooking, this is what we always begin with. And one of the things that makes Cajun cooking different from any other cooking in the world, we always begin with the roux. So once the roux is nice and hot, it gets golden brown after a couple minutes, but you have to continue to stir, otherwise the flour will fall to the bottom of the pot and scorch, giving the dish a very bitter taste. So you don't want that to happen. So take your time and stir that roux continuously while it's browning. And once it gets to the color you like, this is a nice caramel color, as you can see, I'm going to add into the pot the flavors of Louisiana. Of course, I'll put into this a little, onion. And again, no measurement, never any measurement on riverboats. We didn't have time to think about measurements on riverboats. We had to run out and see what little town was coming up around the bend. So I'm sure the cook was just throwing it into the pot, getting that great natural flavor. So I'm going to stir this around really nice. Of course, garlic, a lot of garlic. You know how much I love garlic. Put it into the pot. Some red bell pepper. Again, this is the sweet pepper. All of the flavors of typical Cajun cooking. You've seen me use them before, and again, with no effort whatsoever in measurement. I could really care less about the measurements here, but just think of the great flavors into this dark brown roux. As that all comes together, I'm going to add the main ingredient of the oyster stew, and that is, naturally, oysters. And look at these beautiful oysters here. These oysters, of course, are the North American variety, and they're just so plump and just full of liquid. This is all natural oyster stock. And of course, there's a lot of salt in oyster liquor, so you want to be careful when you flavor the pot. So I'll go ahead and put about half of these in. I just want to start the flavor of the oyster stew. So I'll put those right in. And again, as the oysters hit the roux, all of the natural juices from the oysters start to go right into the dish to help flavor the roux with the onion, celery, garlic, all those nice things. And once that happens, takes just a couple minutes, what I'm going to do is to put in the stock of the stew. And what stock is that? Well, what else? Fresh oyster liquor. Have your seafood supplier, or as we say in some parts of the country, the fishmonger, have him put in just a little bit of that oyster liquor right there. Okay. And we'll, look how hot this pot is. Stir that around. Boy, I tell you, I can't wait for my good friend. I've got a great friend coming to visit with me today, and I know one thing. The minute he smells this oyster stew, he's going to know exactly what this is. I tell you, my friend is the master of the most famous steamboat on the river. He is Master Gabriel Chengery of the famous Delta Queen steamship. He's the captain, and he's going to be out to talk to us a little bit later and continue to cook a couple dishes with me. I can't wait to see him. He's an exciting character. Imagine the stories he must have about the river. So I'm going to continue to add oyster liquor to the pot, just a little bit at a time, until I get to the consistency that I'm looking for. Once I get that nice, thick sauce, now, of course, this can go over rice or patty shells or any of those things. I'm going to just add a little liquor as I feel I need it. There's no secret formula to this dish at all. You just want to add it until it gets to the right consistency. Then I'll add the rest of the oysters. I'll put them in and let these oysters simmer. Get this out of the way. I'll let the oysters simmer in the rich brown gravy, for maybe 30 minutes or so to just pick up all of those great flavors. And let me add a little bit green onions. Again, always looking for additional flavor into the pot. Little fresh green onions. and of course a touch of parsley, a little bit of Louisiana hot sauce, not too much, and of course you'll remember I said not to put in any salt because the oysters have a lot of natural salinity and we don't want this dish to become too salty. We'll let it sit here and simmer for about 25 or 30 minutes, and then I'll show you what I'll do with it in just a second. Let me lower the heat so we don't scorch it here and wipe off this cutting board. Now, my next dish, the dish that I love best from Riverboat Cooking, a dish that's as famous in Louisiana as crawfish etouffee, and that is a great fish dish. This dish right here is going to be a stuffed flounder. Now, flounder is in the same family as Dover sole or pompano, one of the great flat-bodied fish, and it's great for stuffing. And what we'll always do, you see I've made an incision right down the center of the fish, just like this. You want to cut it right down the center until you hit the center of the backbone. Very simple dish to fish to fillet. And then you run your knife right through the inside of the meat, always making sure that you follow the rib cage. You can see that I'm going right down the center of the fish like that. And then you can open up that little pocket for the stuffing. See how simple that is? We just follow the rib cage. Now what I'm going to do here is make the stuffing. I'll take the fish and put it right here. And let's see, we'll make a little bit. What kind of stuffing do you want to make? We can stuff this with a bread stuffing. We can stuff it with rice. We can stuff it with whatever. In Louisiana, we love crab meat, a lot of good crab meat. So I'll stuff it with a combination of crab meats. I'll stuff it with jumbo lump crab, just the prettiest crab meat available anywhere in Louisiana, or the world, I should say. And of course, the most flavorful of crab meats, the claw crab. This is the crab meat that I think has the most delicious flavor of all the crab meats. However, the lump is the most prized. The pearls of the bayous, we call this crab meat. So I'll put a little bit down into the bowl. I don't want anybody to think that we're chinchy here. Put a little bit in there. And then all of the great flavors of Louisiana again. We'll want to put a touch of garlic into it, a little bit green onions naturally. We have to put some color, so I'll put some of the pretty bell pepper right in there. Now I'll have to hold the stuffing together, so I'll put in one egg. You always want to put something. You can put cream or bechamel sauce or anything like that, but I'm going to use an egg and mix all of this together like that. Use your hands if you're at home. Use your hands. Mix it. Get in there amongst the food, as we say, and mix all of that in nicely. I'm going to put a little touch of cracked pepper, a little touch of salt, thyme, and basilico. And these are just dried spices. Just go ahead and feel free to use the dried spices. Mix all of that in. And then, of course, a little breadcrumb to hold it all together. Little breadcrumbs in there. This is seasoned Italian breadcrumbs. I like the seasoned Italian breadcrumbs because they have all of that great Italian flavor and spice in it. Of course, you can see that there's a tremendous amount of crab meat in this dish, not just breading. No, not just breading, not here. So we'll blend that in. Now, we'll have to stuff it. That right here. Let me stir my oyster stew. Oh, look how beautiful this dish is. Just all the oyster liquor coming together into the pot. Takes about, as I say, 20, 30 minutes to cook this dish. Okay, to stuff the flounder. Very easy. Open it up just like that. And you have to use your hands. Go ahead and stuff that beautiful crab meat stuffing or rice or bread or whatever it is that you would like to use. Go ahead and put it right in to the center of the flounder. Isn't that just beautiful? And then, let me rinse my hands off here. And then, of course, we'll want to season the dish. Again, a little cracked pepper. This is cracked black pepper, the real aromatic pepper. A little basil. A little thyme. A squeeze of lemon, naturally. And I've got a great old lemon squeezer from one of the very early riverboats. I want you to take a look at this thing. It's made out of cypress wood with a little indention for the lemon. holes so that the juice can come out, and we would normally squeeze that right on top of the flounder. Maybe 100 years old. Now I'm going to put the liquid in. The liquid I'm using today is a Chardonnay wine, and I'm using a Chardonnay because this great oaky taste of Chardonnay goes perfectly with seafoods or shellfish. So I want to put the liquid, a nice Chardonnay. Of course, you can use any kind of fish stock or whatever you would like. All right, a little paprika for color. Again, a little touch of hot sauce. And some Worcestershire sauce. Look at all the great flavors going together into this dish. And then I'm going to finish it with a little buttery flavored oil. And again, you can use butter, you can use margarine, anything that you would like in this dish. Okay, so that's all done. I'll put the lemon right on top because that's going to be the garnishing on the dish when it comes out of the oven. But hey, you know I already have one done, so I'm going to get it out of the oven for you to look at. I want you to see exactly what that finished dish looks like. Hey, boy. I tell you, this is the payoff in cooking. I want you to take a look at that. That is the payback right there when you can see a great, great dish like that stuffed flounder coming right out of the oven. Isn't that just magnificent? And all of the stuffing is done so nicely, but juicy, very, very, very juicy. And what would I accompany this beautiful dish with? Well, let's see. A lot of different things in Louisiana. On the riverboats, you saw the brown oyster stew. I want to show you the cream-based oyster stew that we find a lot of on riverboats in Louisiana. This is the cream-based stew. You can see all the nice plump oysters. And this would be served as a soup in Louisiana. Nice hot soup. For dessert, of course, a nice creme brulee. This is the caramel custard that's cooked down into the bowl. And then, of course, brown sugar put right on the top of it. And then a crab meat salad. Beautiful lump crab meat salad. And this crab meat salad is special because it's flavored with roasted peppers, the red peppers, green peppers, yellow peppers. Just a very simple dish, but elegant when served with the flounder or the oyster stew, either one. All great dishes found, I guarantee you, on some of the great steamboats of the Mississippi River. Well, I told you I had a great friend in Louisiana who is captain of the Delta Queen. And his name is Master Gabe or Captain Gabe. And I know he's coming on in because I can hear him walking down the hallway. How are you doing, Gabe?
John? Good to see you.
Great to see you. Do you know how many people have known about you for hundreds of years, the master of the Delta Queen? Isn't that fantastic?
I don't know about that now. But you know what? I've always said that Louisiana and the Mississippi River and the steamboats and good food, they all go together. And I wish everybody could smell that oyster stew. It's just unbelievable.
Isn't that great? You
Oh,
know,
boy.
I was reading a quote by one of the greatest of riverboat pilots, Mark Twain, and he said that a pilot cares about nothing else in life except the river, and that his pride surpasses even the pride of kings. Now, you've been there, you are there. Is that true?
That is true. You know, when you're in the pilot house of a steamboat going down the river, it's like the pilot house is even removed from the rest of the boat. It's the most independent job in the world. It's just you, your boat, and the river, and everybody out there like playing the game of chess. Everybody making their moves, you know? It's true.
Well, you know, Twain also said, while I'm a great fan of Twain, and he also said that one day somebody would build the largest steamboat ever to cruise the river, and that boat would be named the Queen of the Mississippi. And I know for a fact that you have piloted the Mississippi Queen. How does it feel to live a legend? You've actually lived that legend of Twain.
Well, you know, we have the only 2 overnight steamboats on the whole Mississippi River system. And our new boat is the Mississippi Queen, built in 1976. And I refer to it as America's bicentennial gift to the river. Costs $30 million to build. We have a crew of 155 on there, and we carry 428 overnight passengers. And indeed, at 4,500 tons, it is indeed the largest riverboat ever built, the Mississippi Queen.
So Twain's little guess into the future really
he was
did happen.
absolutely right.
Right on target.
You know it.
What makes the Delta Queen so special? I know that you're master of the Delta Queen.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, I've sat on the levee and watched that Delta Queen go by, and I've lived your job a million
Yes.
times. What makes that boat so special?
Okay, the Delta Queen is left over from the past. She's 64 years old, and she has a steel hull, but a wooden superstructure, some of the finest woods around anywhere. Oak paneling, the staterooms are Oregon cedar, and teak handrails, and you have the stained glass windows on there. And she's reminiscent of the grand hotels of the past. And you ride the Delta Queen, you get into the nostalgia of the steamboats and the blood and guts feeling of Mark Twain.
Oh, what a beautiful, beautiful boat. What a beautiful sight to see it going up and down the river.
Yes.
I want to continue to talk about steamboats, and we're going to talk about a little of the history and the folklore, but you know, I know you are a good cook. You have to be a good cook. And,
I'm a good eater, I'll tell you that.
And I want to help you. I want you to help me do a dish. I've got a great dish.
You mean I get to help you out today?
You actually get to help me
wonderful.
Because I'm hoping that if you help me, I'll get a chance to help you one day. I can pilot the Delta Queen.
I want you to come and ride with me.
Oh, that would
Now, what am I looking at? I've never seen anything like this before.
Look, one of the great things about cooking and piloting riverboats is that every now and then you come up on something that'll surprise you. This is actually an old German coleslaw maker. They used this to make sauerkraut in the old days. And I found this in some old antique shop, and it works so simply. You just kind of run the cabbage over the top of the blades, and you have a little box here to hold the cabbage, or a little ram. You have to hold that on. I thought you were going to help me here, Gabe. All right. And then you just kind of run it across here once or twice as the coleslaw falls down into the bowl. And look what I have down here. I'll move this out of the way.
Oh, look at that.
Isn't that great?
Beautiful.
That's all of what I have here is red cabbage, green cabbage, all these great things. I'm going to make a seafood slaw of the Mississippi River.
Wow.
So I have all those pretty colors, and why don't you help me right over here? What we'll do, I'm going to make a vinaigrette. Now, I know you know all about making vinaigrettes, right? But I'm going to make a wild onion vinaigrette, and I'm going to start by putting into the bowl, 1 egg yolk. I need to put some red wine vinegar. This is a very simple vinaigrette to make. And then, of course, some Creole mustard. Normally when we make vinaigrettes, we use Dijon or one of those other mustards. But this is the New Orleans style vinaigrette, so I'm using the Creole style of mustard. And wild onions. You've seen a lot of these wild onions growing along the riverbanks in Louisiana. You see them all the time. Well, I've diced some, and I'm going to put them into the vinaigrette, as well as some orange juice and a little touch of lemon juice. And I want you to take this great old olive bottle. Now, this says olive oil in it, and pour it very, very slowly into the vinaigrette bowl, just real slowly as I stir it around. Now, you know, I know that in 1970, it took an act of Congress to save the Delta Queen from being removed from the river, and millions of people actually wrote into Congress to say, keep that Delta Queen on the river. What was the problem with it? Why did they want it off of the river?
Well, you know, Congress passed the Safety at Sea law pertaining to ships at sea and wooden superstructures, and unfortunately, because of Delta Queen, even though she has a steel hull, she has a wooden superstructure, got pulled into this law. So since 1970, we've been getting congressional reprieves to keep the Delta Queen going.
Okay. And millions of people did write in and tell their congressman, hey, that boat's got to stay afloat, right?
Oh, you know it. We had a big Save the Queen campaign, you know.
Well, you know, one of the most famous of riverboat stories, I think, is the great race between the Natchez and the Robert E. Lee. And that race took place in 1870, and I read an account of someone on the riverbank watching that race get started. And the gentleman said that they were throwing wood, and they were even throwing salt meat and chickens into the boiler to fire up those two boats for the race. And I think the Robert E. Lee won, but he described the area around the levees of New Orleans as a scene from Mardi Gras. There was so much excitement. Now, I know that you've lived the race because y'all race the boats every year, don't you?
Yes, we sure do. The excitement continues. You know, we have a big captain's challenge at the start of our annual steamboat race, and that takes place at the end of June. We have a race, it's a 11-day cruise from New Orleans to St. Louis, the Delta Queen versus the Mississippi Queen. We have a great time. We have a captain's challenge that starts in New Orleans, and there's the same hoopla along the riverbank, along the wharves in New Orleans here as there was a long, long time ago.
So people get really excited all along the river. And it ends where?
Ends in St. Louis.
On what day?
The 4th of July every year.
Oh, gee, that must be, talk about Mardi Gras.
Oh, you know it.
That
It's
must
great.
be
We have a great time.
That must be a really wonderful. How does it feel to sit up in that pilot house and see all of this going on? It must be
it's a great honor. It's a great honor, you know. And of course, my wife and I, we might run into somebody when I'm off the boat, and they'll say, "Well, what do you do?" I'll say I'm a Mississippi steamboat captain, and they have trouble believing me at first.
You know, what's the difference between sailing, say, on the Delta Queen versus a cruise ship? There's a lot of cruise ships out there.
Right. I've always said that steamboating is the best kept cruising secret. You ride a ship when you're cruising, you're looking at the sky and the sea. But when you're on a steamboat going up the Mississippi River, you're like a frontiersman going out on an adventure. Scenery all the time around every bend.
Oh, I'll bet, because living on the river, as I did as a young boy, we could always find excitement on the riverbanks, and all these little bitty towns offer a totally different view. It must be magnificent. I'm going to do that. But let's finish the slaw. I'm putting in some beautiful claw crabs. Now, this is that wonderful claw crab meat I was talking about a minute ago. We're going to put some boiled shrimp, which we're boiled in just a little crab ball, giving it Louisiana flavor.
Good.
And again, some of this great lump crab. This is a seafood slaw, and I tell you, if you don't serve this on the Delta Queen today, I know you'll start to serve it pretty soon.
Well, you know
and then the vinaigrette. Now, this is, of course, the orange vinaigrette with the Creole mustard right down into the big bowl, and we'll have to mix this up a little bit. Now, let me ask this, Gabe. I want to ride that riverboat. I want to ride it. How do I get on that thing?
It's easy. All you got to do is just go see your travel agent. Travel agent has all the answers.
Do y'all have a lot of ports up and down the river that you actually stop in?
We have 8 different cities that we run cruises out of, ranging from New Orleans to Memphis to St. Louis, even as far north as St. Paul, Minnesota, and of course on the Ohio River, Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. And then on the Tennessee, we go to Chattanooga, and also in Nashville on the Cumberland River.
Well, great. So one day you're going to see me on that boat, and I'm going to come knock on the pilot house. Now, I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of the oyster stew into the pilot. The fact is, why don't you go ahead and do this, fill this all in. And Gabe, thank you so much for being a part of my Riverboat show today. I really appreciate you coming by.
Thank you.
And I want to make sure that all of you come back and visit again as we continue to cook up some of these great Taste of Louisiana Riverboat style. Y'all come back. How does this look?
Oh, wonderful.
Just keep filling those up for me, and I'll...
It smells so good.
Isn't that
I wish
great?
everybody could smell that.
Man, look at this. Put a little black pepper. I'm going to season this up with all these great spices.
Just look at this.
Isn't that nice?
Funding for this program was provided by Bruce Foods Corporation, makers of Bruce's Yams and other distinctive Louisiana-style food products. And by the Dairy Farmers of Louisiana. Fresh ideas in cooking begin with milk.